and share my desktop. And so it's recording everything, and it's really very good. So anybody that wants to can join, and it'll be on video. I share the videos up later. So this is what I do with all my classes. And so that should be recording, and the sound should be good. Wait, mute. Unmute. All right, so we should be recording this. We're going to see. Anyway, let me start with the first bit. So, all right, so we got a lot of things to cover. Now, these are the 8 domains. It doesn't matter which textbook you have. I tried to update everything for the textbook they told me they were going to give you, and I realized after I went through the first chapter, it's not even worth it. They're all the same. There's a detailed outline for the certification that comes from ISC squared, and everybody just follows it. So there are 8 domains, and it doesn't really matter what book you have. The most common mistake books make is they get far too detailed, and there's a ton of material, just a ridiculous amount, like about 4 classes worth of material. And it's very tempting to go in too much depth, but it's only supposed to be an inch deep. And so anyway, we'll talk, so I have an introduction to this, and then the first 2 domains here, and I just made them so about the same number of stuff pages to cover every day. So let me start with the introduction to the CISSP certification itself, because it is important to understand what it is and whether you want to get it. So that's here, chapter 0. And by the way, all the slides are on my website if you want them. That's good, somebody showed up. Let me turn off the sound if I can figure out how. All right, I may have to, anyway, I may not be too much of a problem with my screen is sort of messed up. All right, so this is CISSP prep. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cover a lot of concepts, a whole lot of terms and ideas, and hopefully we can get by with discussions. We might have student presentations. I'm not sure if you want to do that or not. But in past, my students didn't have a whole semester. They do a lot of work on the side, both to reinforce the concepts and also because a lot of them are not really ready for the certificate. They should do something else. And this turned out to be pretty important. They would give presentations on topics like management and penetration tests they did, and the OWASP top 10 and other security things. And also, we did real-world security audits of my college and other companies. And this turned out to be incredibly important because there was a huge scandal at my college where the chief technology officer hired a corrupt contractor to make a fake virus outbreak to try to charge the college a bunch of money to clean it off. And nobody in the IT department could stop him. And I could, because of this class, my students had done security audits, and I was the only person able to say, I know this is not true. We really tested the network, and I was the only one that was not in his chain of command. He couldn't fire me. So he couldn't stop me from saying this is not true. And it took us like a year or 2, and we pushed him out. Anyway, let me
that was a hard time for your whole,
Yeah, it was a ridiculous situation. I wish you might kill lights in the front. Maybe I can't figure out how to do it all. None of these buttons do anything. Ah, something happened. Oh, okay. I don't know how I did that, but that's all right. Maybe somebody else did. Anyway, so, all right. So anyway, and there are a lot of practice exams for the test, but well, a little bit more about that later. So there's a main class website here. This is where you'll find all these slides I'm using and a lot of links and such. I have a Canvas page with a bunch of quizzes you can take on there if people are into taking the chapter quizzes. If you're planning to get the certification, you might want to do that as some practice, but there's also practice exams in your book, and I'll talk more about the Transcender a little later. But anyway, let's talk about security certifications. This is the one we have here. This is the most famous certification, is the most trusted certification in the business. Like I said, everybody who is a security professional is expected to have this. So whether you like it or not, you pretty much have to get it if you want to be a security manager or security consultant. And if you don't have it, you will probably eventually, as you rise, you'll eventually reach a point where they tell you got to go get it, go to night school or something and get it. But it's not legally required at all. This is because of the paralysis of the government. For the last 15 years, there's been a huge interest in passing regulations around cybersecurity work, and the government cannot decide how to do it. There have been many proposals. and nobody can make a decision and actually pass anything. But if they did have some kind of license required for doing cybersecurity, it would probably be this. This is what the industry uses as effectively our replacement for lack of a federal requirement. So many jobs require it. People typically make 100 grand or more with a CISSP certification because you have to have 5 years of experience, and it means you're up at a management level. If you are a hands-on technical person designing websites, writing code, configuring firewalls, then the CISSP is not going to be immediately valuable to you. It would reflect your desire to move up into management. It does meet the military requirements for the DoD. There are several cybersecurity certifications that meet the regulations there that enable you to handle classified information. And this is a globally recognized cert, so it's pretty irritating. Now it's up to $700 to take the test. There used to be 300 questions in 6 hours. Now they have switched to an adaptive testing framework, which, by the way, I must say is probably not very logical statistically, but anyway, it makes the test shorter. Now it's only 100 to 150 questions because it notices whether you're getting them right. Getting them right, it gives you a harder one. Here, let me figure out how to turn off the sound in Zoom. This is an issue when I share classes this way. I have to hit mute. There we are. Otherwise, somebody will have their speakers on. Okay, anyway, there are a few people joining us online. Everyone is welcome. And as I figured, there wouldn't be too many of them, but it really doesn't matter if there are. It just takes me a minute to dig my way down because my resolution is pretty small in here, but it should be all right. I'll see if I can figure out how to get rid of that crazy thing in my way. Just a moment. Aha, good. This goes away. Now I can do that. There we are. All right. All right. So you got to have 5 years of experience, although you can knock 1 or 2 years off with things like a degree or another certification like Security Plus or something. And it's mostly multiple choice questions. And although there have been many updates to the test, they never seem to change very much. The hands-on pen testers are very, very, very disgusted by the CISSP. It does not mean in any way that you're qualified to do a pen test. And they feel very annoyed that they have to waste their time memorizing all these terms. But that's the way it is, and we've already talked about that. Yeah.
So the 5 years experience, that just like honestly show them how you work there, or
that's a very good question. The 5 years of experience, you have to have a resume, and it has to show that you have 5 years of full-time professional experience in at least 2 of the 8 domains. And what happens is you have to have a sponsor. You cannot become a CISSP unless somebody who is already a CISSP sponsors you. And they then have to audit your resume and call the people and make sure it's true. And if they don't do that, they can lose their CISSP by vouching for you. And they also vouch for your general good character. You're not a criminal, you're not a black hat, you're not some kind of bad person. And so I can do that for you folks if you want to. You've been in my class. But you need to have somebody has to do it. And it is actually very annoying. It was very annoying for me. It's very annoying for the people I sponsored. You usually have to revise your resume like 3 times because the requirement is actually very difficult. You have to specify what you did in enough detail that I can see it's in the 8 domains of security, and you have to have somebody I can reach by email or the phone who will verify that. And that is the hardest thing. Almost all of my students have worked at some startup. That company's gone. It got bought out. My manager moved on. It's very hard to find anybody. And by the way, I had trouble getting it. There were 2 problems. There was an ethics problem I'll talk about later. And the other problem was I had only been a teacher, and teaching does not count. But developing curriculum, they decided, did count. So I had to appeal to human consideration on whether my experience counted and also whether my ethical position would count, which we'll get to. And I made it, but I was a special case in both categories. Yeah. Developing curriculum did count for me, but it's not, because I had to appeal and explain myself, and they had to consider it. Okay. So you can appeal, and then they go to some board meeting and decide whether you're good enough. And I had to do that twice.
Does the CIS, does their certification have to be current, or is it if they did last?
I don't know that. That's a good question. I think the person sponsoring you probably has to be a current CISSP. I know I pay the fee and stay current. By the way, there are 2 ways to stay current. You have to do 60 hours of training every year and submit a document enumerating that training and pay a fee every year, or you have to take the test again every 3 years. And I was surprised when I went to take the test in line, there were a lot of people that just took the test every 3 years. I just turned in training. But of course, for most of us, I think it's fine. This event would count. Going to DEF CON would count. Any kind of industry event like RSA would count. Even taking a class, even reading a book. But you have to, of course, be doing something to stay current. Security goes bad really fast, even faster than other parts of IT. If all you know is what was good 3 or 4 years ago, then you really are not at professional level anymore. So you do have to be doing something to keep up. And anybody at this class, I think obviously you know the same thing. We're all doing this because you have to be a part-time student for the rest of your career in this business. Anyway, and then there's the code of ethics. So by the way, most of our students are probably not going to have the 5 year of experience. You can take the test without having the 5 years of experience, and then you become an associate of ISC squared. And this can help you at jobs. You can say, I've already have the test. All you need to do is give me a job for a few years. I'll have the experience, then I'll have it. And by the way, I've had a lot of students who are on some other track jerk over to this one because their company got a contract with somebody like the military or a major organization. They said, you guys must be certified to get this contract. So they would take all their IT staff, the key people, and make them get this cert right away, because it is a compliance issue for a lot of big contracts. And then there's the code of ethics we'll talk about. There's also SSCP. This is sort of halfway up to CISSP, sort of like there used to be Cisco CCNA, and then there was something before it called CCENT. Now there's 2 steps to a CCNA. This is the same thing. You could do an SSCP if you want to do half of a CISSP. And there's also CISA for auditors, which is technically different, but in practice, it looks to me like it's just about half the content of CISSP. But I did work at an escrow agency, so I had some experience. So perhaps there was some information that I took for granted that wasn't really covered in the CISSP. But it's pretty much similar, and all these are valuable. Here's the ISC search. CISSP is the main, most important one. SSCP is partly up there, and then they got ones in cloud security and software and healthcare out there as well. So I don't know. Those others are fairly new, and I'm not sure how respected they are, but I know in general, ISC squared is very respected. They've been around for a long time. Probably all these are pretty valuable. For some reason, the one almost all the college teachers talk about for the last several years is CompTIA, CISSP. This came out, and they asked me if I wanted to help write it, and they asked me if I wanted to teach it right away. And I looked through it, and I said to them, the unpopular thing they didn't want to hear, I said, I don't think this thing should exist. As far as I can tell, this is an imitation of CISSP, only about half as good, and nobody's going to care. Now, there's a bunch of, this place is an NSA-approved Center of Academic Excellence, and we were doing it too, and they were pushing this. Everybody's pushing it. In fact, they wanted to hire me to teach a class in this, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'll teach a CISSP class instead, and that's what I did. But I said, you know, I really don't think it serves your students to give them this halfway thing. I think the CISSP is not that hard. They can get the real thing. But anyway, it's an issue. This is out there. A lot of people are doing it, and they do have their argument. They say there's more hands-on here, and it's of some value. I've been burned by CompTIA enough times. I think you guys have been in this business for a while. You know, CompTIA has 3 certs that are worth getting: A+, Net+, and Security+. And they keep inventing more. Every year they invent a few more, and they give up on a few others. There's a ton of CompTIA certifications. The green ones here are worth getting. But then there's Cloud+, Linux+, Server+, CASP, Pen Test+, Project+, and they throw these things against the wall to see if they stick, and they don't usually. I mean, as far as I'm not sure anybody's really getting a job from those lesser CompTIA certs, but they really are from CISSP. So if you do teach them, I would not tell your students that they're going to benefit a whole lot from getting that cert. It's just a stepping stone to a real cert like the CISSP. Now, I know a guy with 25 certificates, and his business card says CISSP because nobody cares about anything else. Yeah.
So I know CompTIA offers like free vouchers for different exams. So CISSP, squared, allow offer that for faculty to vouchers to take the exams, or do they make you pay for it?
As far as I know, ISC does not give anybody free vouchers. It's expensive, and somebody has to pay. I don't know any academic program or anything. CompTIA, of course, is very close to the academic community, and they have, yes, I mean, that's another reason why a lot of teachers like it. Yeah. All right. So anyway, then there's the code of ethics I mentioned. There's a whole page about it, but this is the essence of it. You're trying to protect society. You are becoming the guy wearing a suit, holding up the system. If you are a radical and you want to tear down the system and bring about anarchy, then you don't want a CISSP. That is not what it's for. It's for people who want to get a job as a security officer in government or a corporation and move up through the structure. If you hate the system, which I don't know about down here in San Francisco, this is a lot of people are radical and hate the system and hate the man and want to tear it all down, then this is not the track for you. Then, of course, you have to have basic business ethics. Don't tell customers you can do something you can't do. Don't do a bad job. Do what you say you're going to do. Charge what you say you're going to charge, you know, just like a contractor or any other business. This is basic business ethics. Do good work. And then you have to advance and protect the profession. You are supposed to spend some time training other people, helping, mentoring people along. You're supposed to be doing something. Your 60 hours a year of training includes work you do to help others that you're not getting paid for. So that's just the same thing true of lawyers and doctors. You're required to do some pro bono work and some work to help the other people get along. So this means the way they phrased this when I did it was they had a big thing saying you will not associate with criminals because they were concerned that you would join a hacker gang or something. And the problem is I got in cybersecurity through DEF CON, through black hats. Well, not necessarily black hats, but partly black hats. And I contacted criminals on Twitter and I talked to them and I convinced some of them to go straight and some of them taught me their tricks and I put it in my classes. And I said, you know, it is an essential part of my business to deal with criminals. And I give classes at conferences that are proud of the fact that there are criminals there. And so if you tell me I can't associate with criminals, I can't do my job. And that was my appeal on the ethics issue. They have a checkbox. You promise never to associate with criminals. And I said, well, I'm not going to check that box. So they said, well, we're passing you up to appeal. And they approved me when I explained my position. I'm not committing crimes. I don't want my students committing crimes, but I do go to places and associate with criminals. And that's part of my mission. And anyway, but that's their issue. And I understand what they're worried about. So preparing for the exam is pretty daunting. This class is certainly not going to prepare you to pass the exam. No one class will. I think that's true of all cert exams, Cisco and everything. I never take an exam after one class. I go through everything twice. I go through a second whole book before the exam or a good practice test, and I highly recommend the Transcender practice exam. It is very good, and I see it even got cheaper. The Transcender practice exam is down here. There it is. There's the Transcender. It's now down to 99 bucks. This is the best thing to do. There are other practice exams. Don't waste your time. The difference is there are free practice exams and they will just be wrong. They will have the wrong answer. There are ones that cost about 40 bucks and they will have some answers and they'll tell you which one is right, but that's it. But what this one does is they will have a question and 4 answers, and then they will have a complete explanation of why the right answer is right and why every wrong answer is wrong. And the right way to use a practice exam is not to just get the question right. Read the question and read all the answers and make sure that you understand every term everywhere. And if there's an answer that's wrong, but it has a term you don't know, then you stop and study on Wikipedia or your textbook or something you don't understand. You need to know every term on the questions and all the answers. That's the point. And this will help you find that. Yeah.
So, Transcender versus Boson. The Boson practice exam, is that bad? Or?
Transcender for what?
I'm sorry. Compared to Transcender, Boson is...
Boson?
Boson, yeah.
I don't know Boson.
Yeah, it's well recommended for practice type
Yeah.
exam.
There may be other good ones. This one has been around forever, had a good reputation. The others may be good too. But this one here I think is the best. And since you're going to pay 700 bucks on the test, I would highly recommend paying 100 bucks for the practice exam. And you know, if everybody here was real serious about doing it right away, I was thinking maybe we should get this and use it in class. I'm thinking not that many people here are really headed to the cert right away. It may not be worth it. But if you want to get the cert, I highly recommend. This is what I did. I taught the class twice before I had the certificate and made sure the students know that because of the timing constraints. And then I went through study for like 2 weeks, but it really only took like 4 days. And I started a Transcender practice exam. There are 3 exams, the full length of the CISSP, and I start by just doing like 10 or 20 questions in one topic, which would take me like 2 hours because I'd have to stop on every one and Google things and look things up. There are a lot of things I didn't understand. And then by the second day, I was juicing through those in like 10 minutes. So I started taking 40 and 50 questions and started mixing more than one topic. By the fourth day, I was where they tell you to be. Practice until you're getting 100% on all 3 full-length exams. If you do that, they generally have a guarantee that they will pay for your second test if necessary. Because if you do that, you'll pass the real test, and that is true. And it's not stolen material. They are not equal to the real questions. They are just similar. And other tests, practice tests, tend to be too difficult because they don't want students complaining they didn't pass the real exam. The Transcender has the courage to make it the right level of difficulty. So when I took the real exam, it was 300 questions, and there were only 10 of them that I was not 100% sure about. It was really very easy. And that's what I want. You know, I was ready. I was really ready to take it because I went through a textbook twice teaching a class. So I really knew everything in that textbook. The textbooks only have about 70% of what you need, though. They always do. There's this outline, and each author makes their own interpretation of the outline. So even if you know everything in the book, you're still not ready. That's why I say you always have to have 2 passes through the material. A test and a good practice, a book and a good practice test, or 2 different books. I've done different versions for different tests. Going through one training and then taking the test is very risky. You have a high chance of actually flunking the test, even if you did well in that training class. So I warn my students, getting an A in my class does not mean you're ready to take a test. It means you've done the first pass and you need to do a second review pass with some other material. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, what's the title of your class? Is it CISSP?
Oh, it's called Information Security Professional.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that like a first, second, third, fourth year class? Or?
Oh, well, we're not that organized. We're a 2-year college, but in fact, in our program, people can take things in almost any order. But the normal thing I would tell people to do is before taking the CISSP, they should take A+, Net+, and Security+, and probably Certified Ethical Hacker, which are our first half of Certified Ethical Hacker, and ethical hacking and network defense. But the main thing I think you really need is A+, Net+, and Security+. You need to know hardware, IT, and networking.
So if I'm also to your college and we also offer those CompTIA stuff,
yeah.
At the end, if you want to offer that, maybe I can talk to there, you can share your.
No, I think that would be perfectly fine. That's what we do. If you were at a 2-year college and you had the usual IT stuff and then this at the end, it would be quite valuable. And also CISA would be good here. Yeah, that's what we're adding that one to our program. So there's a couple slides I skipped here. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, another thing about it is the test is very weird and frustrating. It is like the questions are written deliberately to be as confusing as possible. Very often there is a question and all the answers are wrong, and you have to guess the one that is least wrong. And this has been around. Originally, people thought they must just be idiots that wrote the test, but I think it is attempting to simulate the condition of management. Management, you don't really know what's going on, and you're not really getting 100% accurate information, and you still have to choose the smartest path of the options. Anyway, there's a lot of people write about these. There's blogs and everything about these questions. At first, it's very strange. That's why you really need a practice test. It is not like CompTIA exams. CompTIA exams are more simple and clear. They ask you a technical question like something about an IP address, and there's one answer that's just clearly right, and the others are just clearly wrong. This is not that way. It requires sort of judgment calls, which would be better. And so anyway, this is a business issue. You will end up thinking a lot about Dilbert if you take your CISSP exam. It is a lot like the land. And that, of course, the joke in Dilbert is the culture clash between the technical guy and the management guy who cannot communicate and are often at cross purposes. So anyway, all right, so we've talked about this, and that's the introduction to what you're doing here. So I think I want to start with the first chapter. We'll do a bit of that, and then we'll take a break. What is 10, 19 minutes? Didn't start till 9:30 though, so we'll get a little further before we take a break. All right, so let's pick up at chapter 1 here. I'm going to get to at least the first Kahoot or two. The Kahoots are something I learned from Cyber Patriot, which make it a lot more fun. And you really need to do something because this is, I hope you're ready. There's no hands-on project. There's no hacking. This is just talking about terms and echoing back the terms. The CISSP exam is basically learning to memorize 1,000 terms. So if you expected something more exciting, you're not going to get it. So security and risk management, the basic idea here. So we're going to talk about the general principles. This is basically the security plus, but then moving a bit into the management. So Basic security terms, of course, one of the main ones is the CIA Triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the three things you need for security. And this was developed, we'll get there later, this was developed historically as you went through a series of theoretical security models to try to define what security was. The first model had only confidentiality, then they discovered integrity mattered, and these three things have to be balanced, and you can never have all three perfectly. If you have more confidentiality, you lose availability, and so on. You have to balance them to have an acceptable level of security. There is no perfect security, like there is no perfect health. Security is a state of relative well-being. You have a reasonably secure network when people can do their job and they have enough success doing what they need to do that they can make your company succeed, and not enough misdeeds and offenses are happening to stop the company. Just like you have reasonable security on the street when people can go to work and go out to dinner and not too many of them are getting killed by muggers. You can't get the crime rate down to 0, and you can't make success at normal things up to 100%, but you get it to an acceptable level and you call that security. So there's an opposite of everything. The opposite of confidentiality is disclosure. The opposite of availability is destruction. And the opposite of integrity is alteration, when unauthorized people are altering things. All right, and I gotta mute the online people. This online muting thing doesn't work as well as it should. That's one of the defects of Zoom, but overall Zoom is wonderful. All right, so confidentiality means that only authorized people can read data. So the main thing you worry about here is personally identifiable information, like credit card numbers, usernames, birthdays. There's also health information is a special issue down here covered by HIPAA. And so you should only be able to access information if you have clearance, if it's military type information, access approval, and a need to know. These are common issues. Integrity means that nobody is changing data unless they're authorized to do so. So you don't want your employees making mistakes and putting in bad data, and you don't want attackers changing the data. So this is things like referential integrity in databases and access control when people get in. So there are controls. And you enforce all these things with controls and countermeasures. So access controls are the obvious one. People have to log in, you have to know who they are, and then you have a list, an access control list of who's allowed to do things. You have to authenticate people. They claim to be somebody, and then they prove it with something like a password or a fingerprint. And then you have detection systems to detect breaches and errors, violations of your security policy. And you have measures like encryption and hashing that make it harder for an attacker to alter data because there's a way to detect it. So you can attack these things with viruses or unauthorized access or errors or backdoors. These are all things where someone might start modifying things they are not supposed to be modifying. Availability. Things are available when your authorized users can get to what they need and do their work. That is considered availability. So denial of service attacks are where you prevent that by things like flooding the network with junk traffic or turning off servers or turning off electrical power. Those are all things that cause the network to be unavailable to your legitimate customers. And as we've seen greatly this year, that can be enough. And when I first heard about denial of service attacks, I thought, what's the point? Hacking and stealing data, that makes money, but how could you make money with denial of service? And now we know with ransomware, this is very effective. I take your stuff away and I charge you money to give it back. That's very effective. Just a denial of service attack can be enough to make a lot of money for people. So here's threats, device failures, core network design where you have only one router or switch or firewall, and if it goes down, everything is down. Usual things that cause things to go down, most commonly human error, but also environmental issues, power failures, and so on. All right, in just a moment, I'm going to see if I can somehow persuade this thing. I guess it's just my low resolution. All right. Anyway, so, all right. So you can prevent these things by having better design. You see it in your Net Plus, design things for high availability, have redundant servers, redundant switches, redundant cables, and all of that. You can monitor performance so you notice when one system is about to go down or be overloaded. And you have plans for when things go down, business continuity planning and disaster recovery plans so that when something goes down, you have a backup and an offsite alternate server and a business partner that can take over part of the business and so on. Those are the management level availability controls, and they really matter. I saw a survey that said that something like 60% of all businesses have no disaster recovery plan at all. Their plan is, if a disaster happens, like a building burns down, you just give up and quit. Now, this might be okay for like a mom and pop restaurant, but if you want to play in the big leagues, like you want to be a department store and you want to have multiple locations and you want to make a contract with a supplier where you get a big discount and you're going to buy a lot of it for 5 years, it is no longer acceptable to just say, oh, a building burned down, so we give up. You have to cope with it. You have to have a plan for even when the usual disasters happen, how are you going to continue business? And that's why suppliers trust you enough to give you those discounts and contracts and trust you to have, that's responsibility. You don't just quit, you have a plan to cope with problems. So you have to balance these. None of them is ever perfect. And if you increase one of these things, you lose one of the others. So if you want to increase confidentiality, you might have long, complicated encryption keys, long, complicated passwords. Now what happens is you've lowered availability because your own staff is going to forget their password and get locked out so they can't do their job. That's always that way. You can, in these three desirable features are opposing each other. You can't have all three. Of course, with more money, you can have more of all three, but for any fixed amount of money, you can only have so much. Auditing and accounting are necessary for PCI compliance and otherwise. This means you don't just have a network running where people are doing work, you have some measurement of what they did. It started with the phone network, AAA servers, authorization, accounting, and auditing. You measure who's calling who and for how long so you can bill them. But in computer networks, you also measure what people are doing so you can do something about breaches. Now, if it turns out somebody did a bad thing, you have logs you can go through to see who did what, and that's what you have to have here. So identification is when you claim to be somebody. Authentication is proving that you really are that person, usually with something like a password. Then, now that you've proven who you are, authorization means you have permission to do something, like access a file or use a printer or enter a building. Auditing records what people do, and accounting reviews the log later. All these are necessary if you want to have security. All right, so these are the AAA services: authentication, authorization, and accounting. This is what Radius servers do, and like I say, it started with the phone network and is now standard for all computer networks. You have to have all three of these things going on. Here's an example of it. The Octomom was a woman that had 8 children, and so hospital staff that were curious accessed her medical records and leaked them, and they had logs, so they were able to find who this is and fire them or prosecute them. That's what you need to have. If you don't keep logs of who's doing what on your network, then when a bad thing happens, you're in trouble here. You're in more trouble than you need to be. Having proper accounting means you can take good responses, effective responses when you have security breaches. So we're up to the first Cahoots. There'll be quite a few of these. I found these to be quite popular to help keep people awake. So let me go to Kahoot. And I'll start it here, and then you go to a different URL to use it. I'm going to shrink this a bit. There we are. And then favorites, the one I want now is 2A1. The numbers are a little screwy because I numbered them with a different textbook, but it doesn't matter. Here they are. All right. So you have to go to loaded. Okay, here we go. All right, classic. There should be music. Let me figure out how to turn on my music. Go to kahoot.it and put in that number. And yeah, you need a computer or a phone or something. Hey there. Oh, books.
I'm just barging in.
Oh, good. I heard about
books.
books. Oh, wondered about them. Okay, good. Good. Okay, good. Thank you. I would like to turn on the sound, but I'm having trouble with my computer.
Oh, do you want to help?
No, I don't need that sound. I found it here. There we are.
Oh, it's your computer?
It's just my computer, and it should let me. Okay. It's not letting me turn on the sound. I don't want that. I've got this crazy touch bar, and for some reason, it is freaking out and not letting me turn on the sound, which is too bad because there's nice sound in the Cahoots. Okay, our Cahoots will have no sound right now until I can figure out what the heck is wrong with my computer. It seems determined to kill the sound. Anyway, such is life. So, oh, I know why. It's sending the sound out the MIDI port of this MIDI adapter. I don't have MIDI. This has happened to me before. There is some way to turn that off, but I can't remember how. Anyway, I will. So, and the online people are also welcome, but I think maybe they've gone to sleep. Anyway, all right. So, here's Cahoots. You have to answer these questions correctly and quickly. And then so a hacker defaces your homepage. What aspect of security has been compromised? And here's the choices, and you will see colors and symbols, so you can pick one of these choices. And you win by being the accurate and the quickest. So, okay. So that what has been compromised is integrity. All right. So Robert is the highest. You can get 1,000 points on each one. All right. So what aspect of security do you enhance with fault-tolerant systems? All right, that's availability. Okay. What does a username do? All right, that is identification. That is claiming to be somebody. You have not proven it. You have just claimed to be somebody. All right. If there are errors in data entry, what security has been compromised? Okay, that's a failure of integrity. All right, and what's an access control list for? Okay, that's authorization. After you know who somebody is, then you decide what they're authorized to do. So they have an access control list on something like a folder, a list of users that can open this folder. So first you have to perform identification and authentication, so you know who they are, and then the access control list does the authorization. All right, so here's the winners, and I'm going to make a note of the winners. I will record scores of them later in one system or another, but B, PC, and Jane are the winners, the first Kahoot winners. Let me save this. And when we take a break, I'll see if I can get my machine working a little better. So we can get the sound, because the sound is fun. But anyway, we'll do one more section here, I think, and then take a break. All right, so here's other desirable security features that are not as central as confidentiality, integrity, and availability, but still good things. Non-repudiation means people cannot deny what they did later. So you have things like digital signatures and audit logs. If you're going to do financial transactions, you need this. If I sign an agreement saying I'm going to pay $1,000 a month, and if I don't, you can repossess my car, I'm very likely to want to lie and say later I didn't sign that. So you're going to want a signature that can prove that I made that agreement and I can't weasel out of it later. Least privilege, people should only have enough privileges to do what they need to do and no more. It's a general security, so you shouldn't have everybody being administrator on their system unless they really need to be. And need to know is called horizontal control. Least privilege is a vertical control. People shouldn't have overall powers beyond what they need. Need to know is a horizontal control. Even if you have top secret clearance, you are not allowed to access all the top secret data. You're only supposed to access the data in your area of interest, so you are not learning a bunch of information you don't need. It's not that you aren't vertically cleared for it. You don't have a horizontal need to know. This got the military in big trouble. when 9/11 happened, they discovered that the need to know was siloing information. So one department had one clue about 9/11, another security department had another, and they didn't talk to each other, so they couldn't put the pieces together. So they took down the horizontal controls and encouraged people to share information. So then Bradley Manning was able to access all kinds of information from his remote station as a private that had nothing to do with it and leak it all to WikiLeaks. So they had to put the horizontal controls back in, and this is the way security always is. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Every control you put in has a good side and a bad side, and there's always people sneaking around. There's no perfect answer. It's a constant series of adjustments. So that's the game here. There's the information silos explained in this book. And Bradley Manning is the one that was then able to access far too much information because they took down the silos and leak far too much. So, all right. So a subject is someone trying to do something on a network, like someone accessing data. An object is the thing you're trying to access, like a room or a folder or a file. So Internet Explorer is a subject when it's running in memory, but it's also an object in memory. iExplorer is a file sitting on a disk and someone might be modifying it. This is like the difference between servers and clients. Almost every device is now both a server and a client, just like everybody is both a subordinate and a boss. There is somebody below you and somebody above you, and you have two different roles depending on how you look at it.
So you get a question
Yeah.
that says, is Internet Explorer a subject or an object?
You have to define what you're doing, and it is sometimes a subject and sometimes an object. So when you're putting on an update, it's an object. When you're trying to open a web page with it, it's a subject.
If you're opening the web browser, then it's a subject.
Well, then it would be an object. You're trying to launch it, and it has to decide whether you're allowed to launch it, and there's a limit to who's allowed to access it. So it's a subject at that point. But when you use it to do something else, then it is a subject. It's a subject. Like if you try to open a file with it, now it is the subject and that file is the object. So really the subject-object distinction really only applies to one transaction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Good. All right. And so defense in depth is the idea you have to have multiple levels of security controls so that if one fails, another control might still save you. So you don't just have guards at the fence, and once people get in, they can do anything they want. You have also locked doors and card scanners and monitors and cameras and everything inside, so that even after people pass the first layer of security, there are other layers of security before they get to something really important. Microsoft recommended only one layer until 2001. They said all you need is one gateway at the edge of your network, and then you trust all the machines in the network. And of course, finally, of course, this is no longer true at all because people are bringing in laptops and thumb drives and iPods and connecting to the internet. And it's not true at all that you can trust the machine next to you because they're in the same room. So now we have firewalls and antivirus on every workstation, and we have an IDS and a firewall on the corporate network, and there are just many layers of defenses. Due care is doing what a reasonable person would do, not doing stupid things that are obviously foolish. Due diligence is the management of due care. This is proving that you actually did make an effort to make sure that various stupid things are not happening. For example, if you buy a house, you have to do a search to make sure that the person selling it to you is actually the owner of the house. That's due diligence. Gross negligence is the opposite. If you do not perform due care, then there will be legal consequences, and they will be different if you can be proven to have neglected your duty of due care. I'm going to try putting that at the bottom and see if that gets it out of the way better. Anyway, all right. Abstraction is a common concept where you group a lot of security controls together into one group. You could start by assigning individual people at your company rights to access folders, but what's a lot better is to sort them into groups like administrators and help desk and managers. Put the people in a group like sales and then give the whole sales group these permissions. That is the best way to do it. That's abstraction. Data hiding is creating a data container, which limits who's allowed to get at it. So the idea here is to prevent low privileged people from accessing data at a higher classification level. Encryption, of course, is scrambling data so nobody can read it unless they have the encryption key. This is a confidentiality routine, and it also helps integrity. All right, and I've got a few more Kahoots here. All right, let me try those, and then I'll see if I can change the resolution of my screen or something because I'm having trouble with everything so crammed together. But we will carry on. This is 2A2, which is here. Okay. All right. So there you are. Go back to Kahoot.it and put in that number. I guess I have to put this on the top. It's the only way it shrinks down. If there's any way to move it to the side or anything, I think I just need to change my resolution. I'll see if I can figure that out. All right, we got 8 people. That might be it. The happy hacker, I see. Good. Any more coming? No screams of protest. Okay. So, why don't sales staff have administrative rights? Okay, that's least privilege. They shouldn't have any more privileges than they need to have, and they probably don't need that. Why do you use a ladder instead of climbing up on desks and chairs? All right, that's due care, doing what a reasonable person would do. Janitors put slippery slope on the floor. What has happened? Okay, that's negligence. All right, Joe uses a printer. So what's the printer? Duplicate answer there. Oh, well. It is an object, and Joe is the subject. And there will be access restrictions determining whether Joe is authorized to do what he's doing. All right, so PC is up to 6, and B is up to 6. You get 3 points each time, although I don't have any other points to mix with them in this class yet. And then TOSIN, okay. EDUS, okay. Good, I'm keeping track of the winners. I'll post them or something later. All right, well, let's take like a 15-minute break. Let me see if I can fix some of my technical issues. And yeah, I think they still have coffee or something out there. I'm going to see if I can improve this presentation a bit. So I'm going to stop the share. I'll start another share in 15 minutes.